baby Brontosaurus is about to hatch in a world long forgotten by time, where the skies stretched endlessly, and the air was heavy with the moisture of misty jungles. Life moved at a slow but awe-inspiring pace. Towering trees, some reaching as high as mountains, shaded the forest floor below, where prehistoric creatures roamed freely. The air buzzed with the sounds of insects the size of modern-day birds, and the distant cries of immense creatures echoed through the valleys. Among these creatures was one of the giants of the land, the Brontosaurus. These gentle giants ruled the earth with their towering necks and massive tails, their steps shaking the ground beneath them. They were herbivores, grazing peacefully on the ferns, leaves, and treetops that covered the landscape. But while they were enormous, they were not immune to the challenges of survival, and perhaps the most vulnerable time for a Brontosaurus was at the very beginning of life, when they were but fragile embryos inside their eggs. In the heart of a dense forest, tucked away beneath a towering canopy, lay a nest. This nest was not like the nests of birds or other small creatures. It was a mound of dirt and vegetation, carefully constructed by a mother Brontosaurus over many days. In the center of the nest lay 5 massive eggs, each one roughly the size of a large boulder. The shells were thick and pale, with a rough, almost stone-like texture. They had been there for months, protected by their mother, who remained vigilant against the dangers of the prehistoric world. It was in one of these eggs that something extraordinary was about to happen. The eggs had been silent for weeks, as the embryos inside slowly developed, nourished by the yolk within. But now something was different. Inside the largest of the eggs, there was movement. Tiny movements, imperceptible at first, but growing stronger with each passing minute. The baby Brontosaurus inside was ready to hatch. The prehistoric world, the world outside the egg, was a harsh and unforgiving place. While the mother Brontosaurus was a towering and powerful creature, there were many dangers that lurked in the shadows. Predators like the fearsome Allosaurus prowled the forests, always on the lookout for vulnerable prey. The mother knew this, and she had carefully chosen a secluded spot for her nest, hidden away from the prying eyes of predators. The forest around the nest was alive with activity. In the distance, a herd of triceratopses grazed peacefully on the tall ferns, their massive horns glinting in the sunlight. Pterosaurs soared overhead, their wings casting long shadows on the ground below. Occasionally, the distant roar of a predator would echo through the trees, but for now, the nest was safe. The mother Brontosaurus stood over her eggs, her massive body providing shade and protection. She had not eaten in days, unwilling to leave her nest for even a moment. Her instincts told her that the time was near. Her babies were about to hatch, and they would need her protection more than ever. The first signs of life inside the largest egg, the baby Brontosaurus, was beginning to stir. It had been growing inside the egg for many months, its tiny body slowly developing into the massive creature it would one day become. But for now, it was still small, its body curled up tightly inside the confines of the shell. The baby's first movements were slow and tentative. Its tiny legs twitched, and its head moved slightly, pressing against the inside of the shell. It could feel the walls of its prison, the hard, unyielding surface of the eggshell that had protected it for so long. But now it was time to break free. With a burst of energy, the baby Brontosaurus pushed against the shell with all its might. The shell was thick, designed to protect the embryo from the harsh world outside, but now it was a barrier that needed to be broken. The baby's beak-like snout, called an egg tooth, was sharp and designed specifically for this purpose. It scraped against the inside of the shell, chipping away at the hard surface. Outside, the mother Brontosaurus heard the faint tapping sounds coming from the egg. Her massive head lowered to the nest, her nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air. She could sense the life stirring within the egg, and her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and anticipation. Her babies were about to enter the world. The tapping continued, growing louder with each passing minute. The baby Brontosaurus was relentless in its efforts, pushing and scraping at the shell until, finally, a tiny crack appeared. A sliver of light pierced the darkness inside the egg, and for the first time, the baby Brontosaurus caught a glimpse of the outside world. The struggle to hatch, but the journey was far from over. Hatching was a difficult and exhausting process, and the baby Brontosaurus had only just begun. The crack in the shell grew larger as the baby pushed and kicked, using all of its strength to break free. The egg tooth on its snout chipped away at the shell, but the process was slow and laborious. Outside, the mother Brontosaurus watched with bated breath. Her massive body cast a protective shadow over the nest, shielding her babies from the harsh sunlight. She could hear the sounds of life coming from inside the egg, and her maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. She wanted nothing more than to help her baby, but she knew that this was a journey it had to undertake on its own. The other eggs in the nest remained still and silent, but the largest egg was alive with movement. The crack in the shell spread, spiderwebbing across the surface as the baby Brontosaurus continued its struggle. Its tiny legs kicked against the inside of the shell, and its head pushed forward, determined to break free. Finally, after what felt like hours, a small piece of the shell broke away completely. The baby Brontosaurus poked its head out of the egg, blinking in the bright sunlight. Its eyes were wide and curious, taking in the sights and sounds of the world for the first time. The air was thick with the scent of vegetation, and the distant calls of other dinosaurs filled its ears. But there was no time to rest. The baby Brontosaurus was only halfway out of the egg, and it still had a long way to go. It wiggled and squirmed, using its tiny limbs to push itself further out of the shell. The process was slow and exhausting, but the baby was determined to be free. A new life begins at long last. The baby Brontosaurus broke free from the confines of its egg. It tumbled out onto the soft nest, its body still wet and glistening from the fluids inside the egg. Its tiny legs wobbled as it tried to stand, and it let out a soft, high-pitched cry. The mother Brontosaurus lowered her massive head to the nest, her eyes filled with love and pride. She gently nuzzled her newborn, her warm breath washing over the tiny creature. The baby Brontosaurus responded with a soft chirp, instinctively recognizing the presence of its mother. For the first time, the baby Brontosaurus stood on its own legs. It was unsteady at first, its legs trembling under the weight of its body, but it quickly found its balance. It took a few tentative steps, its tiny feet sinking into the soft earth of the nest. The world was vast and overwhelming for the newborn, but it was also full of wonder. The baby Brontosaurus gazed up at the towering trees that surrounded the nest, its eyes wide with curiosity. The air was alive with the sounds of other creatures, and the baby could feel the vibrations of the earth beneath its feet. But the world was also dangerous. The mother Brontosaurus knew this all too well. Predators lurked in the shadows, always on the lookout for vulnerable prey. The baby Brontosaurus was small and fragile, and it would take time for it to grow into the massive creature it was destined to become. The mother Brontosaurus stood guard over her newborn, her eyes scanning the forest for any signs of danger. She knew that the first few days of life were critical for her baby, and she would not let anything happen to it. Her maternal instincts were strong, and she was ready to defend her young with her life if necessary. Surviving the wild as the days passed, the baby Brontosaurus grew stronger. It quickly learned to walk, its legs becoming steadier with each passing day. It followed its mother closely, mimicking her movements and learning how to navigate the prehistoric world. The baby Brontosaurus fed on the soft ferns and leaves that grew near the nest, its tiny teeth perfect for chewing the tender vegetation. It was still small, but it was growing fast, its body slowly gaining strength and size. The bond between the mother and her baby was strong. The mother Brontosaurus was always close by, watching over her young and protecting it from harm. She knew that the world was full of dangers, but she also knew that her baby was strong and resilient. Thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Wide Scope for more diverse content. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Also, please suggest ways I can create better quality videos so that I can provide you with even better content in the future.